Garbage collectors who were making their rounds early one morning found a home ablaze and immediately called in the fire brigade, who rushed to the scene. While extinguishing the fire, they observed movement in the upper bedroom window. Someone was trying to grab their attention and clearly needed help. Medical personnel was summoned to the location, and the individual, in a state of shock and unable to communicate, was rescued. Subsequently, the individual was transported to the hospital, where they later slipped into a coma. Meanwhile, bodies were recovered from the premises, and authorities determined that the victims had been murdered rather than perishing in the fire. This unsettling revelation prompted widespread speculation. Who could have perpetrated such a heinous crime against this innocent and beloved family? This is the shocking case of the Romal family. Jean-Claude Romal was born in Lons-le-Saunier, France on February 11, 1954, and raised in Clairvaux-les-Lacs in Jura. He attended Lons-le-Saunier's high school until he completed his baccalaureate. In 1971, he started classes at Lycée du Parc in Lyon, but left after one term. Later, he joined medical school. He would later marry a woman named Florence Crollet. Florence Crollet was born on March 6, 1956. She studied at the University of Lyon to become a doctor. It is there that she met Jean-Claude Romal. Jean-Claude, who was a distant cousin of the family, initially didn't catch Florence's interest. They also barely knew each other, and didn't spend a lot of time together. However, over time, through their mutual friends and study sessions, they started spending more time together. Jean-Claude Romal was immediately smitten with Florence and made persistent efforts to win her over. She, on the other hand, saw him as an ordinary guy, not particularly attractive to her or well-spoken. Florence had envisioned marrying a typical doctor, intelligent, attractive, and charming. Following a failed second-year exam, she switched from medicine to pharmacy. Together with Romal and Luc Ladmiral, who passed their exams, they maintained a routine for the next decade, studying, taking exams, and supporting each other until graduation. In 1980, Florence and Jean-Claude Romal tied the knot, and 6 years later, they had their first child, Caroline. 2 years after Caroline's birth, their son Antoine arrived. Florence lived the life of a conventional wife and mother, working at local pharmacies to support her family, while her husband worked at the World Health Organization in Geneva, a short distance from their home in France. Florence was out and about in Ferney, France, a few days post-Christmas in 1992. Her children, Caroline and Antoine, were at school, while Jean-Claude was at work in Geneva. It was a typical day, reminiscing about their recent Christmas festivities. While out, she bumped into the school president, who had something on his mind since before the holidays. Politely exchanging holiday greetings, they chatted about their Christmas experiences. The conversation gradually shifted to an intriguing incident involving Florence's husband. The president mentioned the headmaster's demotion due to an affair with a teacher, prompting a school board meeting. Florence remembered the incident, but was uncertain where the president was leading with the conversation. He mentioned his intention to discuss the matter with Jean-Claude, as he also served on the school board. The president's secretary attempted to find Jean-Claude's contact information in the World Health Organization directory, given his employment there, but strangely, his name was not listed. Florence found this amusing as she laughed it off, but at the same time, she was intrigued. She assured the president that there must be a valid explanation for the absence of his name and number, promising to address it with her husband upon his return from work. After exchanging farewells, they never spoke again. Jean-Claude Romal kept his work life quite private, sharing minimal details with both family and friends. Florence held the belief that her husband engaged in significant research and commanded respect in the medical field. He maintained a clear boundary between his professional and personal life, to the extent that Florence never had access to his office phone number, as Romal had insisted on wanting to remain undisturbed during work hours. If Florence ever required urgent communication with him, she had to page him, and he would promptly return her call at his earliest convenience. Friends often inquired about Jean-Claude's role at the WHO in conversations with Florence. They would ask, "What exactly does Jean-Claude do at the WHO?" Florence would attempt to deflect the question with a chuckle, confessing that she too was uncertain. Occasionally, she would playfully speculate that one day she might discover her husband was a secret spy. It was during the Christmas season of 1992 that Florence learned of an annual Christmas tree event organized by the WHO. This gathering allowed staff members to bring their families to the office to decorate a large Christmas tree together. Surprisingly, her husband had never mentioned this event to her. Florence felt unsettled by the situation. From the school president's revelation about her husband's absence in the WHO directory to the discovery of the unmentioned family event at his workplace after over a decade of service, these incidents likely lingered in Florence's thoughts. The extent to which these revelations troubled Florence internally remains uncertain, as it is unclear whether she confronted her husband about them. As recounted by Florence's brother, who joined the family for the holiday season, a profound sadness seemed to shadow Florence during those days. The conversations that transpired within the household during this period are left to speculation. The days rolled by, ushering in the new year of 1993. A couple of days into the year, Florence and Jean-Claude Romal found themselves shopping together. Insisting that Romal purchase a new suit, Florence eventually persuaded him. Later that same day, after parting ways with his wife, Romal made a visit to a pharmacy, placing an order set to be ready by January 9th. On the evening of January 5th, Romal made withdrawals from 2 different ATMs, totaling 2,000 francs. He generously gave 500 francs to a homeless individual he encountered before proceeding to a gun store. Exiting the store, he carried tear gas canisters, cartridges, a silencer for a .22 caliber rifle, and a stun wand. Returning home, the night passed uneventfully, and time passes until a frantic call to the fire brigade was placed on January 11th at 4 a.m., reporting a fire engulfing the house. Garbage collectors on their early morning rounds discovered the blazing house and promptly alerted the fire brigade, who rushed to the location. While extinguishing the fire, the responders noticed movement in the upstairs bedroom window, indicating someone was inside, seeking help. Medical personnel was summoned, and the person who was Jean-Claude Romal was rescued from the residence. Upon extraction, he appeared in a state of shock, unresponsive as paramedics attended to him. Subsequently, Jean-Claude was transported to the hospital, where he eventually lapsed into a coma. Within a short span, the fire was extinguished, enabling the first responders to enter the premises. Their family friend Dr. Luc Ladmiral was summoned to the scene, witnessing with dread as stretchers carried out the charred remains of Antoine, Caroline, and Florence. Whenever a household fire results in fatalities, the police launch an inquiry to uncover the circumstances surrounding the incident. This process aims to offer closure to the bereaved families and eliminate the possibility of any criminal activity. Therefore, following the tragic fire at the Roman residence, law enforcement authorities initiated an investigation, given the magnitude of the loss of an entire family of a prominent doctor. During the examination of Florence's remains, the medical team made a disconcerting observation: evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of her skull. This revelation sparked suspicion and intrigue, particularly after determining that Florence's demise resulted from blunt force trauma rather than the fire itself. During the examination of the children, another distressing revelation emerged. Contrary to initial assumptions, both Caroline and Antoine did not perish in the fire. Instead, they met their demise from gunshot wounds hours prior to the inferno. This stark reality indicated that the events unfolded before the household was consumed by flames. Subsequently, law enforcement commenced an inquiry into the suspicious deaths of Florence and her children. However, with Jean-Claude Romal incapacitated in a coma, rendering him unable to provide any information, investigators faced the daunting task of pursuing alternative leads. Transforming the Roman residence into a crime scene, authorities reached out to relatives, acquaintances, and neighbors in a bid to unravel the mysteries surrounding the family. Luc Ladmiral, the doctor who witnessed the victims being removed from the scene, was contacted as part of the investigation. Uncertain about the unfolding events, he struggled to comprehend the situation. When questioned by investigators about potential enemies of the family, Luc couldn't identify any. Nevertheless, he was summoned for an interview. Several days later, Luc found himself facing police officers who probed into the family's relationships and recent events that could have triggered the fire. Despite thorough questioning, the consensus remained unchanged. The family enjoyed a positive reputation, and no significant incidents preceded the tragedy. Subsequently, the focus shifted to Jean-Claude Romal, revealing a shocking revelation. Romal had never been employed by the World Health Organization, nor had he delivered any lectures at the University of Dijon. In fact, he was not a qualified doctor at all, let alone being employed. Initially skeptical, Luc's disbelief grew as he recollected their shared academic journey, which slowly led him to a startling realization. He recounted to the authorities an incident from their second year, when he had noticed Jean-Claude Roman's absence during an exam. This departure from Roman's usual behavior had raised concerns for Luc. Upon visiting Roman at his residence, he observed his friend's ailing condition, with clammy skin, pale complexion, and dark circles under his eyes. Jean-Claude Roman disclosed that he was battling lymphoma, a form of cancer, albeit manageable, exacerbated by exam-related stress. At Roman's request, Luc pledged to keep this information confidential, especially from Florence. Investigators determined that Luc didn't have any additional pertinent details. Consequently, they awaited the forensic laboratory's findings on the charred residence, hoping to glean further insights for their inquiry. Investigators noted peculiarities within the residence. They discovered that all doors had been locked internally, indicating that no unauthorized individuals had entered the premises. Initially, an accidental fire was the primary hypothesis, until the condition of the bodies was revealed. Subsequent findings hinted at a more sinister turn of events, prompting the urgent need to interview Jean-Claude. During Jean-Claude Roman's coma-induced weeks, law enforcement zeroed in on him as their prime suspect, initiating a thorough investigation. Although Roman lacked a medical degree, his extended tenure at the university raised suspicions. Upon contacting the educational institution, it was confirmed that Roman had pursued studies for 12 years. While he successfully completed his first-year exams, he failed to pass those in the second year. Exploiting the absence of enrollment restrictions, Roman continuously re-enrolled in the second year throughout his academic tenure. All those years of academic dedication, attending lectures, and studying medical books, yet Jean-Claude's failure to pass the second-year examination seemed perplexing. The possibility of oversleeping and missing the exam session lingered as a plausible explanation. A chance for redemption had presented itself with the opportunity to retake the exam months later, but he never showed up. As investigators delved into the deaths of Florence and the children, they were confronted with another grim discovery. Jean-Claude's uncle, seeking to relay the tragic news to his parents, arrived at their residence only to encounter an eerie silence. Upon entering, he discovered the lifeless bodies of his mother and father, both victims of gunshot wounds. A ballistic examination confirmed that Jean-Claude's parents had been fatally shot with the same firearm used on Antoine and Caroline. Furthermore, the close proximity of their estimated time of death indicated a deliberate connection. The unfolding events only grew more mysterious. Following the public disclosure of the tragedies, the police received an anonymous call from a woman unwilling to disclose her identity or any personal information, expressing reluctance to involve herself in the investigation. However, she did possess crucial information to share, revealing that she had engaged in a romantic relationship with Jean-Claude Roman after meeting him in Paris, and she too had been told that he was a researcher at the World Health Organization. Roman had misled her into believing he was a specialist with influential connections attributed to his purported role. The woman had been led to believe that Jean-Claude Roman was actively involved in and financing significant research projects. Moreover, he portrayed the banks in Geneva as highly advantageous. Leveraging his supposed position, Roman enticed her with the opportunity to invest funds in a Swiss bank offering an impressive 18% interest rate return. Through persuasive tactics, Roman managed to persuade his lover to make a financial investment. Initially hesitant, they reached an agreement wherein the woman would provide him with 90,000 francs for investment, with the expectation of receiving returns after 3 months. As the deadline approached in early January, she reminded Jean-Claude Roman of their arrangement, emphasizing her need for the funds to sustain herself and her family. Following negotiations, they arranged to meet for a dinner gathering, with Roman extending an invitation to dine with a prominent political figure, sparking the woman's interest and eagerness to reclaim her investment. On the agreed day, Roman picks her up in Paris to embark on their anticipated journey. As night descended, Jean-Claude Roman and the woman found themselves still on the road, clearly lost. Suddenly, Roman pulled over and launched a surprise attack on the woman inside the car. He employed tear gas, a stun wand, and a cable in an attempt to incapacitate her. However, she fiercely fought for her life and managed to escape from the vehicle. Roman pursued her, but inexplicably halted when she pleaded for mercy. It seemed that he realized his plan had failed, and he begged for forgiveness. The excuse he provided to the woman was now familiar to the investigators. He claimed that his lymphoma was flaring up, causing him to behave erratically and unlike his usual self. In a state of survival mode, the woman agreed to remain silent about the incident, in exchange for Jean-Claude safely returning her home. Investigators began to develop a grim perception of Jean-Claude Roman. He was a pathological liar, a manipulator, and a scam artist. But the question that lingered in detectives' minds now was he also a murderer? Upon awakening from his coma, Jean-Claude Roman was promptly approached by investigators, eager to engage in conversation. With suspicions lingering, they sought a confession from him. However, Roman chose to remain silent. He sat in his hospital bed, gazing into the distance with a vacant expression, refraining from speaking. As inquiries swirled about the events of January 9th, the origins of the fire, the shooting of Antoine and Caroline, the severe injuries sustained by his wife, the discovery of his deceased parents, Jean-Claude faced a barrage of interrogative probes during multiple sessions. Despite the relentless questioning, he divulged nothing. It wasn't until the investigators told him that they knew the truth, that he was not a doctor and was unemployed, that a shift occurred. The tipping point that prompted him to finally break his silence remains unknown, but eventually, he began to speak. On the night of January 9th, Jean-Claude and Florence were spending a typical evening at home. After putting the children to bed, they retired to their own bedroom. According to Jean-Claude Roman, his memories of that night abruptly ceased until the chilling recollection of discovering his wife sprawled on their bed, surrounded by a pool of blood, with a bloodied rolling pin in his hand. Uncertain of what transpired, whether an argument had ensued or not, Jean-Claude Roman proceeded to sleep beside his wife and awoke the following morning to prepare breakfast for the children. Caroline and Antoine gathered on the couch to watch a cartoon selected by their father. He served them each a bowl of cereal before joining them to watch television. When the children inquired about their mother's absence, he informed them that she was unwell and needed extra rest. During that morning, Jean-Claude observed that Caroline felt warm, prompting concerns about her health. To prevent any potential illness from spreading, he instructed Caroline to go upstairs to her bedroom. Somehow, Caroline ended up lying face down on the bed with a pillow over her head. Roman couldn't provide a clear explanation to investigators regarding this sequence of events, but speculated that it may have evolved from a game he played with his daughter. Subsequently, he retrieved his .22 caliber rifle, fitted with a silencer, and fatally shot his 7-year-old daughter in the back of her head. In a similar manner, Antoine met his tragic demise. His memories then became hazy. Subsequent evidence presented during the trial indicated that he left the house, purchased newspapers, and appeared to engage in routine activities, portraying a normal demeanor to any casual observer. Upon returning home, he watched television. Although Jean-Claude refuted these details during the trial, one fact remained certain. He received a phone call from his parents, inviting him for lunch before noon on that fateful day. And he accepted the invitation. Departing from his eerily quiet residence, he drove to his parents' home and joined them for lunch. He then summoned his father upstairs under the guise of inspecting a purportedly malfunctioning boiler pipe. Despite his elderly father's physical limitations, he made an effort to examine the pipe at Jean-Claude's request, only to be callously shot in the back by his own son. Descending to where his mother was, he did not concoct any games or stories this time. His mother became the sole victim whom he shot while facing her. The motive behind this act remains a mystery. Before departing, he also shot the family's dog. When questioned about this during the trial, it was the only instance where he exhibited a semblance of remorse. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in sobs and tears, revealing that the dog had been cherished by his children, evoking memories of Caroline. It was at this moment that Jean-Claude Roman resolved to return home and take his own life. However, his plan did not unfold as intended. Recall the earlier mention of his mistress providing him with 90,000 francs for an alleged investment scheme? This was how Jean-Claude Roman sustained himself. He regaled numerous individuals, including his relatives and Florence's family, with tales of extravagant returns on investments, and due to their familiarity with Roman, they placed their full trust in him and they let him cook. Consequently, he amassed substantial sums of money from these trusting individuals over time. He would channel these funds into accounts under his own name in Geneva, thereby avoiding scrutiny from tax authorities among others. Moreover, he meticulously managed the family's financial affairs, ensuring that Florence remained unaware of his deceitful activities. Of course, and eventually, the inevitable time to serve what he was cooking had arrived. As expected, the people began demanding the return of their money, along with the promised profits. Regrettably, this was an obligation he could never fulfill. Every single franc he acquired was swiftly spent on his immediate needs, leaving him with virtually nothing saved, despite amassing over 2 million francs across the years. The inevitable moment arrived, when he would have to reveal the truth to Florence and all those who had entrusted him with their money. He found himself unable to sustain his web of lies any longer. The mounting pressure left him feeling trapped with no apparent escape. Like many other family annihilators, he convinced himself that by ending their lives, he would actually be sparing his family from the repercussions of his actions. Subsequently, he planned to take his own life, thus avoiding the harsh reality he faced. He believed he would be able to keep lying forever, and had never anticipated being discovered or facing the need to confess. He would always just plan to fabricate another falsehood to sustain the charade throughout his life. On June 23, 1996, the trial commenced. He remained mostly silent, seated behind glass with a police officer on each side. He avoided making eye contact and kept his head down. By July 2nd, a verdict had been reached. Jean-Claude Romand was convicted of the murders of his wife, his children, and his parents. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 22 years. In 2019, he petitioned for release from prison to reside in a convent. During his incarceration, he had reportedly become a devout Christian. He had accepted his mistakes and would spend the rest of his life repenting as a form of punishment. The judge granted his plea, citing his good conduct as a contributing factor. It is sad and unfortunate what all the victims endured at the hands of this liar, manipulator, and monstrous individual. As we reflect on this horrific tale, our hearts and minds are with the individuals whose lives were abruptly ended, and the grieving families and friends they left behind. If you found this video compelling, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and check out our other videos. Thank you for watching.